and this time from Member of Parliament, Mr. Shashi Tharoor, who was to join us today, but because of some travel restriction, he couldn't be here in physical this evening, but he sends this message for Dr. Manmohan Singh.
30 years ago, India's mild-mannered finance minister delivered a startlingly bold budget to the nation with the memorable words, "No power on earth can stop an idea whose time has come." The idea he was advancing was that of the liberalization of the Indian economy, and the reforms he ushered in proved almost revolutionary, lifting many of the controls of the license permit quota Raj, as it was known, and transforming India's derisory Hindu rate of growth from below 3% to a galloping, even tigerish 8% plus in the decade and a half that followed. 3 decades later, I'm delighted to hear that that finance minister, subsequently prime minister, and now the greatest of our surviving elder statesmen, Dr. Manmohan Singh, receives TIOL's Lifetime Achievement Award. At the pinnacle of his career, he has done so much for his nation that today, as he enjoys a little more of a well-deserved rest, it is the right time to honor him and thank him for his extraordinary services to India and to humanity. He has very often not got his due because his mildness has been dismissed by his critics as timidity. His calm and unflappable manner was excoriated by his rivals politically as complacency and ineffectiveness, and he was blamed for things that were not his fault by people who have presided over far more economic failures than he ever had to experience during his years in office. This man did more than anyone to earn his country a worldwide reputation as the world's next big economic success story after the first decade of the 21st century. Yes, there was some bad news, but those are elements that pale in comparison with the bad news that has assailed India in the last few years. What is absolutely vital is to look at his accomplishments. The India that he took by the scruff of the neck in 1991 was an inefficient and underperforming, centrally planned economy which for 45 years had placed bureaucrats rather than businessmen on the commanding heights, stifled enterprise under a straitjacket of regulations and licenses, thrown up protectionist barriers, and denied itself trade and foreign investment in the name of self-reliance, subsidizing an unproductive public sector and struggling to redistribute its poverty. Today's India boasts a thriving entrepreneurial and globalized economy with a dynamic and creative business culture, treating with the world on its own terms, and during Manmohan Singh's prime ministership, pulling over 10 million people a year above the poverty line. The contrast is extraordinary, and no one deserves a greater share of the credit for this transformation than Dr. Manmohan Singh. Even as the planet has faced an unprecedented global economic crisis from 2008-9, the last 5 years of Dr. Manmohan Singh's tenure as Prime Minister, India under him weathered the worldwide trend and remained the second fastest growing major economy in the world after China, at a time when most countries suffered negative growth rates in at least one quarter in the last 4 years. Manmohan Singh's stewardship had a lot to do with this. His was the voice heard with the greatest respect when the G20 gathered to discuss the world's macroeconomic situation. When then President Obama was asked, he mentioned Manmohan Singh first amongst the top 3 world leaders he admired. The Indian economy grew between 7 and 9% in Manmohan Singh's time. The services sector grew at 9%, and under him accounted for 58% of India's GDP growth, a stabilizing factor when a world increasingly heading to recession could not afford to buy more manufactured goods. The country's 247 million households, 2/3 of them rural, saw literacy rates rise to nearly 80%. 51,000 schools were opened under Manmohan Singh. almost 1 million teachers appointed, an impressive number of Indians had phones. They went from about 9% at the beginning of his tenure to over 75% at the end of his tenure. 100 million new phone connections were established in the last few years of his rule, including 40 million of those in rural areas. And thanks to the ethos brought in by Manmohan Singh, nearly 60% of Indians had a bank account because of the large number of new bank accounts he opened to permit direct transfer of benefits from the government. He added additional power generation capacity, made new electric connections to rural India, got thousands of villages power for the first time, and by the time he left office, 93% of Indians in towns and cities had some access to electricity. All these trends laid the foundation for India's macroeconomic future. And the work that was done to lay the groundwork in infrastructure development has since continued, and the work done by him on public-private partnerships blazed a path that others have chosen since to follow. It's been extraordinary to see the way in which he has been able to overcome some of the endemic challenges of the Indian economy, including corruption, for which his government was demonized, but which has persisted and worsened in the present government. There is no question that what he was able to achieve for India, India's dogged progress in the face of all the challenges that everyone was familiar with, is far removed from the biased portrayal of a government beset by inaction and so-called policy paralysis, for which he was upbraided by his political rivals in his last couple of years of office. As he himself, as Prime Minister, modestly put it, I would be the first to say we need to do better, but let no one doubt that we have achieved much. Indeed, Manmohan Singh achieved much, and he has earned the right to be hailed for what he has done and to be the worthy recipient of the TIOL Lifetime Achievement Award today. May India benefit from what you have done for it, and may the millions of Indians who have benefited from your leadership and the millions of people around the world for whom you have shown a guiding light long be grateful for your years of service to our nation and to the world. Jai Hind, Manmohan ji.
Thank you, Sri Shashi Tharoor, for taking time out for recording this video and sending it for TIOL Awards. It means a lot to us.